What if Arthur Dayne survived the Tower of Joy and raised Jon Snow in Starfall? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The morning sun beats down mercilessly on the red stones of dawn as 7 riders approach the Tower of Joy. Dust swirls from their horses' hooves, and their banners hang limp in the still air. Ned Stark leads them, his face grim beneath dark hair, already streaked with premature grey. The weight of war and loss presses down on his young shoulders like a physical thing. Before the tower stand 3 knights in white cloaks, their armour gleaming despite the heat. Sir Arthur Dayne rests his hand on Dawn's pommel, the pale blade catching sunlight like captured starfire. Beside him, Sir Oswell Went adjusts his grip on his sword, while Lord Commander Gerald Hightower stands motionless as stone. "I looked for you on the Trident," Ned calls out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "We were not there," Gerald replies, his aged voice steady and sure. Arthur steps forward, his violet eyes meeting Ned's grey ones. "When King's Landing fell, Sir Jaime slew your king with a golden sword, and I wondered where you were then." "Far away," Ned says, dismounting. "Or Aerys would yet sit the Iron Throne, and our false friend would burn in 7 hells. When the Battle of the Bells tolled, I wondered where you were. Down in the Kingswood, we were." Arthur's jaw tightens. Rhaegar fought valiantly. Rhaegar fought nobly, and Rhaegar died. The words taste like ash in his mouth. His prince, his friend, cut down by Robert's warhammer at the Ruby Ford. Ned draws ice, the Valyrian steel singing as it leaves its sheath. And now it begins. Arthur pulls Dawn from its scabbard, and the sword blazes white in the Dawnish sun. "No," he says quietly. "Now it ends." The battle erupts with sudden fury. Steel rings against steel as the 7 Northmen crash against the 3 Kingsguard. Howland Reed darts between the larger knights like a shadow, his spear finding gaps in armour. Sir Oswell falls first, Ethan Glover's sword piercing his throat. Lord Commander Hightower follows, overwhelmed by 3 attackers at once. Bodies litter the red stones. Martin Cassell lies still, his blood pooling in the dust. Theo Wool clutches his stomach, his breath coming in short gasps. Only 4 men remain standing in the courtyard that blazes with heat and death. Arthur circles Ned like a prowling cat, Dawn weaving patterns of light between them. The sword of the morning moves with fluid grace, each strike precise and deadly. Ice meets Dawn in showers of sparks, but Arthur presses forward relentlessly. Ned stumbles, ice flying from his hands to clatter across the stones. Arthur raises Dawn for the killing stroke, sunlight running down the blade like liquid fire. This is how it should end. This is how a knight dies. But Howland Reed appears behind him like a ghost, his spear point pressing against Arthur's throat through a gap in his gorget. "Yield," the Crannog man whispers. Arthur freezes, Dawn still raised above Ned's prone form. For a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. The choice hangs before Howland like a sword itself. Kill the greatest knight in the 7 kingdoms, or show mercy to a beaten foe. "I yield," Arthur says, his voice barely audible. Dawn trembles in his grip. Howland steps back, but keeps his spear ready. "Your sword, sir." Arthur looks down at Dawn, the blade that has been his companion since he earned the title Sword of the Morning. Slowly, he reverses his grip and offers the pommel to Ned, who struggles to his feet. "Keep it," Ned says, breathing hard. "You'll have need of it yet." From within the tower comes the sound that changes everything. A woman's voice, weak and full of pain, calling Ned's name. "Lyanna." Arthur's heart clenches like a fist. They have failed her too. Ned pushes past Arthur toward the tower entrance. Lyanna. Arthur follows, Dawn hanging loose in his grip. They climb the narrow stairs in silence, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The smell of blood and roses grows stronger with each step. In the tower's highest chamber, Lyanna Stark lies dying in a bed of blood. Her dark hair spreads across the pillow like spilled wine, and her grey eyes burn with fever. In her arms, she holds a bundle wrapped in fine silks. "Ned," she whispers, and her voice breaks his heart. Ned drops to his knees beside the bed. "Sister, I'm here." Arthur remains standing near the door, but his eyes find the child in Lyanna's arms. Dark hair, he thinks, but something in the shape of the face speaks of Rhaegar. This is Rhaegar's son. This is what they died protecting. "Promise me, Ned," Lyanna says, her grip tightening on the bundle. "Robert will kill him if he knows. Promise me you'll protect him." Ned's face twists with anguish. "I promise." But Lyanna's burning eyes turn to Arthur. "And you, sir. You failed Rhaegar at the Trident, but you can still serve his son. Promise me you'll raise him as he should be raised. Promise me you'll tell him who his father was." Arthur steps forward, his throat tight. "My lady, promise me," she repeats, and there is steel in her dying voice that reminds him of Rhaegar himself. Arthur looks down at the child, then at Ned. 2 promises. 2 oaths that will bind them both. "I promise, my lady. By my sword, and by my honor, I will raise him true." Lyanna's eyes flutter closed. His name is Aegon. Aegon Targaryen. The words are barely a breath, but they echo in the chamber like thunder. She dies with the summer roses still blooming in her hair. The silence stretches between the 2 men like a chasm. Ned stares at his sister's still face while Arthur studies the child. Aegon. Another Aegon, for the realm already mourns Prince Rhaegar's son who died in King's Landing. But this boy lives, and that changes everything. "What now?" Arthur asks quietly. Ned looks up, his eyes red with grief. "Now we make this work. Robert cannot know. No one can know." Arthur nods slowly. "I will take him south, to Starfall. My sister Ashara will help care for him." "And what of your vows? Your place in the King's Guard?" Arthur looks down at Dawn, then sets the blade across his knee. With a sharp blow from the pommel of his dagger, he cracks the pale blade near its base. The sound echoes like breaking glass. "My watch is ended," he says, using the words of the Night's Watch, but meaning something different entirely. Sir Arthur Dayne died here today, defending his prince's son. What remains is just a man with a duty to fulfill. Ned picks up the infant, and for a moment his stern face softens. "He has your look about him, John. But your mother's eyes." He pauses, then hands the child to Arthur. "Take care of him." Arthur accepts the bundle, feeling the weight of the future in his arms. The child stirs, and for an instant, violet eyes meet his own. Rhaegar's eyes. "I will guard him with my life," Arthur says. "And when he is old enough, I will forge Dawn anew. For him." Outside, the sun begins to set over Dawn, painting the red stones the color of blood and roses. The Tower of Joy stands silent now, its purpose fulfilled. But for Arthur Dayne, another tower waits in the south, where a child will grow in safety until the day he is ready to reclaim his birthright. The Sword of the Morning takes his first step on a new path, carrying a prince in his arms and pieces of a broken sword at his side. Arthur Dayne rides south through the red wasteland of dawn with a prince in his arms and death at his back. The infant stirs against his chest, wrapped in fine silks that grow dusty with each mile. Behind them, The Tower of Joy shrinks to a pale dot on the horizon, but its ghosts follow like shadows. The broken pieces of dawn rest in his saddlebags, wrapped in his white cloak. No longer does he wear the pristine armor of the King's Guard. Instead, he has donned the simple leathers of a traveling knight, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that casts shadows across his features. Each hoofbeat carries them farther from the life he knew and deeper into an uncertain future. The child whimpers occasionally, and Arthur stops to feed him goat's milk from a skin he purchased in a nameless village. The boy's violet eyes watch him with an intensity that seems too old for an infant. Rhaegar's eyes, Arthur thinks, and his heart clenches with familiar pain. Meanwhile, in the cold halls of Winterfell, Ned Stark kneels before his sister's tomb. The crypts echo with his footsteps as he lights candles before Lyanna's stone effigy. Her face, carved by the castle's master mason, seems peaceful in the flickering light. But Ned remembers her final moments, the blood and the roses and the weight of promises made. She died of fever, he tells his gathered bannermen when they ask about the Tower of Joy. There was fighting, but the fever took her before we could bring her home. Lord Glover nods gravely. And the child? There were rumors. Ned's face hardens like winterstone. What child? My sister bore no children. She died a maiden, as she lived. The lie burns his tongue, but it is a necessary pain. Somewhere in Dawn, a prince grows in safety because of this deception. Ned touches the iron pommel of ice and swears silently that Jon Snow, for that is what the world will know him as, died with his mother at the Tower of Joy. But Robert Baratheon's rage still echoes through the Red Keep when ravens bring word of the encounter. The new king paces his solar like a caged wolf, wine sloshing from his cup with each heavy step. "Dead?" Robert bellows, his voice shaking the windows. "The last dragon spawn is truly dead." Grand Maester Pycelle bows his ancient head. "So Lord Stark reports, your grace. The child perished with his mother. The Targaryen line ends with Viserys across the narrow sea." Robert's laughter booms through the chamber, relief and fury mingling in the sound. "Good. Let them rot in whatever foreign dirt will take them. I'll not have dragon's blood poisoning my realm." He raises his cup in a toast to empty air. To Lyanna Stark, who died clean of their taint, and to Ned, who avenged her honor at last. The wine burns sweet in Robert's throat, but it cannot wash away the taste of war and loss. Somewhere in the castle, Cersei Lannister watches from the shadows and files the king's words away for future use. But that is a story for another day. Arthur reaches Starfall as the sun sets behind the ancient castle walls. The Palestone sword rises white and tall above the Torrentine, its peak lost in evening mists. Guards at the gates recognize him despite his common clothes, and word spreads quickly through the castle's halls. Lady Ashara Dayne meets him in the courtyard, her violet eyes wide with shock and something deeper. She is beautiful still, with the dark hair and fine features of their ancient line, but grief has carved new lines around her eyes. "Arthur," she whispers, as if afraid he might vanish like smoke. "They said you were dead. They said the Tower of Joy." "I lived," he says simply, dismounting with care for the bundle in his arms. But much else did not. She sees the child then, and her breath catches. "Whose?" Arthur glances around the courtyard where servants and guards pretend not to watch. "Not here, sister. We need privacy for this tale." In her solar, with thick doors barred and windows shuttered, Arthur tells her everything. The battle at the tower, Rhaegar's last son, Lyanna's dying wishes, the promises that bind him now like chains of honor. Ashara listens in silence, her face pale in the candlelight. When he finishes, she reaches out with trembling fingers to touch the child's cheek. "Aegon Targaryen," she breathes, "Prince Rhaegar's boy." "The world thinks him dead," Arthur says, "and he must remain dead until the day comes for him to live again." Ashara lifts the infant from his arms, and for the first time in hours the child stops fussing. He stares up at her with those two knowing eyes, and she manages a sad smile. "He will be safe here," she promises. "House Dayne has kept greater secrets than one prince." But even as she speaks, Arthur sees the weight settling on her shoulders. To harbour a Targaryen heir is treason beyond measure. If Robert discovers their deception, Starfall will burn, and every soul within its walls will die screaming. "The cost may be too high," Arthur warns. "If we are discovered, then we will pay it." Ashara cuts him off, her voice steady as steel. "House Dayne remembers. We remember the days when dragons ruled justly before madness took the throne. If this child is Rhaegar's, then he deserves better than Robert's hatred." That night, in the castle's sept, Arthur kneels alone before the altar of the warrior. The seven-pointed star gleams dully in the lamplight, and shadows dance across the painted walls. He draws his dagger and lays it before the statue's feet. "I, Arthur of House Dayne, do hereby renounce all claims, rights and privileges of my service to the King's Guard." He speaks to the empty air. "My watch is ended. My vows are void. Let no man call me sir, for I have fallen from grace." The words echo off stone walls, but no answer comes. The gods remain silent, as they always have. Arthur retrieves his blade and stands, feeling lighter and heavier all at once. Sir Arthur Dayne is dead. What remains is simply a man with a child to raise and a legacy to protect. Outside his window, he hears Ashara singing a lullaby in the old tongue of the first men. Her voice drifts through the castle like a ghost of better days, when honor meant something and princes kept their promises. The infant's crying stops, replaced by peaceful silence. Arthur touches the broken pieces of dawn where they rest on his table. Tomorrow he will speak with the castle's blacksmith about reforging the blade. Not as it was, but as it must become. A sword for a prince in exile, waiting for the day when the realm remembers what justice looks like. But tonight, he simply listens to his sister's voice and plans for an uncertain future. Somewhere beyond the castle walls, the world spins on without them. But within these ancient stones, a dragon sleeps safely in Dornish arms. The Game of Thrones continues, but now it has a new player whose very existence remains a secret, wrapped in lies and half-truths. In time, those lies will unravel, and the realm will tremble. But for now, there is only a child's quiet breathing and the sound of waves against Starfall's foundation stones. Arthur closes his eyes and tries not to dream of silver princes and dying promises. 2 years have passed since the Tower of Joy, and the weight of secrets grows heavier with each dawn. In the gardens of Starfall, a dark-haired boy takes his first unsteady steps across the sun-warmed stones. John, for that is what they call him here, though his true name burns like a brand in Arthur's memory, toddles toward the fountain, where silver fish dance in clear water. "Artie!" the child cries out, his chubby arms reaching toward the man who sits beneath the lemon trees. The word comes clear and sweet, and Arthur's heart twists like a blade between his ribs. Not father. Never father. Just Artie, the kind knight who tells him stories and helps him chase butterflies through the courtyard. Arthur rises and catches the boy as he stumbles, lifting him high into the morning air. John laughs with pure delight, his violet eyes sparkling in the Dornish sunshine. "Again!" John demands, his small fists tangling in Arthur's dark hair. "Fly again!" Arthur spins him once more, but his smile feels brittle at the edges. The child calls him by a pet name, but there is no recognition of blood or bond. Perhaps that is for the best. A father would claim his son. Arthur can only guard and guide from the shadows. From the castle's highest window, Ashara watches them play, and her heart breaks a little more with each passing day. Dark circles ring her violet eyes like bruises, and her once bright laughter has faded to whispers. The burden of their secret presses down on her shoulders like a lead cloak. "My lady," her handmaid Jenna ventures carefully, "perhaps you should rest. You barely touched your morning meal." Ashara's reflection stares back from the polished silver mirror, pale and gaunt. "Rest," she murmurs. "Yes, perhaps. But what dreams await me, Gina? What nightmares dance behind closed eyes?" She sees them every night. Robert's warriors storming Starfall's gates, the boy's small body broken on the stones, Arthur's head on a spike, while ravens feast on his eyes. The price of hiding a prince grows steeper with each sunset, and Ashara fears she lacks the strength to pay it much longer. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the Iron Throne cuts Robert Baratheon as he shifts restlessly against its twisted metal. Before him kneel 3 men in the black leather of royal investigators, their faces hard as winter stone. "What news from Dawn?" Robert growls, wine already staining his beard, though the sun has barely cleared the Red Keep's towers. Sir Balon Swan steps forward, his voice carefully measured. "Your Grace, we have questioned the lords of the Torrentine. House Dayne remains in mourning for Sir Arthur's death at the Tower of Joy. They claim no knowledge of Targaryen loyalists." "Claim," Robert repeats, tasting the word like sour wine. "But you suspect otherwise." "There are whispers, Your Grace. Servants speak of strange visitors in the night, ships that dock without manifests, gold that flows too freely through certain purses." Robert's knuckles whiten as he grips the throne's armrests. The metal bites deep, drawing thin lines of blood. "I want every stone in Dawn turned if necessary. The dragon's spawn may be dead, but their sympathizers still draw breath. Find them." "Your will, Your Grace," the men chorus before backing away with measured steps. Tywin Lannister observes from his place beside the throne, his green eyes calculating. "The Dornish are a proud people, Your Grace. Heavy-handed tactics might drive them toward rebellion rather than submission." "Then we shall be heavier still," Robert snarls. "I'll not have dragon lovers plotting in the shadows while I sleep." But Tywin's gaze lingers on the reports scattered at the throne's base. House Dayne, Starfall, Arthur Dayne's sister. The threads of suspicion are there for those clever enough to weave them together. The Hand files the information away for future use, as he does all potentially valuable secrets. Back in Starfall's solar, Arthur studies maps of the narrow sea, while Jon naps in a basket lined with soft furs. Escape routes and safe harbors mark themselves in his mind like battle plans. If the worst comes, they must be ready to flee across the water to the free cities. Ashara enters quietly, her footsteps soft on the thick carpets. "You plan our exile," she observes, settling into the chair across from him. "I plan for every possibility," Arthur replies without looking up. "Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Father taught us that. Father also taught us that honor was worth more than life." Her voice carries a hollow note that makes Arthur glance up sharply. "Sister?" Ashara's smile is bright and terrible, like sunlight on a blade's edge. "Do you remember the story Septimore Dayne used to tell us? About the princess who leaped from her tower rather than marry the monster king?" "Ashara." Arthur sets down his maps, sudden fear clawing at his throat. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that some burdens are too heavy for mortal shoulders." She stands and moves to the window, where sunset paints the Palestone sword in shades of gold and crimson. I'm thinking that dead women tell no tales. Arthur follows her, his hands reaching for shoulders that feel fragile as bird bones beneath his touch. You are not alone in this. I share the burden willingly. But you did not choose it. Ashara turns in his grip, and her eyes burn with fever-bright intensity. You made a promise to a dying princess, and I simply happened to be here when you needed shelter. The boy calls you Artie, with love in his voice. He calls me my lady, with courtesy learned at my knee. Tell me, brother, which of us truly matters to him? The words cut deeper than any sword. Arthur wants to deny them, but the truth sits heavy between them like a stone. Jon smiles when Arthur enters a room. He tolerates Ashara with the patience children show to kind strangers. He is only 2 years old, Arthur says desperately. Children change. Bonds grow stronger. Or weaker. Ashara touches his face with fingers cold as winter. I see the way you look at him. Like Rhaegar reborn. Like redemption made flesh. But when you look at me, you see only the weight I cannot bear. That night, while the castle sleeps and Jon dreams innocent dreams in his cradle, Ashara Dayne climbs the Palestone Sword's winding stairs. Her bare feet make no sound on the stone steps, and her nightgown flows around her like mist. At the tower's peak, dawn spreads below her like a tapestry, woven from moonlight and shadow. The wind tugs at her dark hair as she stands on the battlements, her toes curled over the edge where stone meets empty air. Below, the rocks wait with patient hunger. A single step would end the fear, the sleepless nights, the constant weight of treason hanging around her neck like a noose. For House Dayne, she whispers to the night wind, for my brother's honor, for the boy who deserves better than the burden my weakness brings. She steps into darkness, her white gown billowing like wings as she falls toward the unforgiving stones below. Arthur finds her at dawn, her body broken on the rocks where the Torrentine meets the sea. The waves wash over her still form, staining the foam pink with blood. He carries her home, with tears streaming down his cheeks, her lifeless weight somehow heavier than full armor. In the solar where Jon still sleeps, Arthur sits holding his sister's cold hand while the child stirs in his basket. When violet eyes open and find his face, Arthur forces himself to smile. Artie sad? Jon asks, his small face scrunched with concern. Yes, Arthur answers honestly. Artie is very sad, but Artie will be all right. Jon struggles to his feet and toddles over to where Arthur sits. With the solemn gravity that only children possess, he pats Arthur's knee with one chubby hand. Better now? He asks hopefully. Arthur lifts the boy into his lap and holds him close, breathing in the scent of innocence and warm milk. Yes, little prince. Much better now. But as the servants prepare Ashara's body and the ravens fly to announce her tragic death, Arthur makes a silent vow. His sister died to keep their secret safe. Her sacrifice will not be in vain. He will raise this boy to be worthy of the crown he carries in his blood, and when the time comes, he will forge dawn anew in the fire of justice. The Game of Thrones has claimed another innocent life, but the hidden prince sleeps peacefully in his guardian's arms, unaware of the price already paid for his safety. 5 years have passed since Ashara's death, and the boy who calls himself Jon has grown tall and strong in Starfall's sun-warmed halls. At 7 years old, he moves with a grace that speaks of noble blood, his violet eyes sharp with intelligence that seems too old for his young face. The dark hair that once marked him as different now falls in waves past his shoulders, and when he smiles, there are glimpses of both Stark honor and Targaryen fire. In the castle's practice yard, wooden swords clash under the morning sun. Arthur circles his young pupil like a hunting cat, his own training blade held in perfect balance. The weapon is carved from Dornish hardwood and shaped like dawn itself, down to the pale leather grip that matches the original's design. "Again," Arthur commands as Jon stumbles, his small sword flying from sweat-slicked fingers. "A true knight never surrenders his blade willingly." Jon wipes his nose with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dust across his cheek. "But you're bigger and stronger. It isn't fair." Arthur kneels beside him, his voice gentle but firm. "The world is not fair, little prince. Your enemies will not give you courtesy for your youth or consideration for your size. What matters is not the hand that holds the sword, but the heart that guides it." He retrieves the fallen weapon and places it back in Jon's grip, adjusting the boy's stance with patient hands. "Your father," Arthur catches himself, then continues more carefully. "The great knights of old were not always the strongest men in the field, but they were the most determined. They fought not for glory or gold, but for something greater than themselves." "Like what?" Jon asks, his young voice hungry for stories. Arthur's eyes grow distant as he remembers a silver prince who played his harp and spoke of justice. "Like protecting the innocent, like keeping their word even when it costs them everything, like choosing what is right over what is easy." Jon nods solemnly and raises his sword again. This time when Arthur strikes, the boy is ready, his blade meeting the attack with surprising force. Wood cracks against wood, and for a moment they are locked in perfect balance. "Better," Arthur says with genuine pride. "Much better." From the shade of the courtyard's edge, a younger boy watches with wide eyes. Edric Dayne, 4 years old, and already showing the violet eyes of his bloodline, clutches a small wooden knight to his chest. His wet nurse holds him steady as he bounces on his toes with excitement. "Cousin Jon is so brave," Edric whispers to his carved toy. "When I'm big like him, I'll be a knight too." Arthur glances at the boy and feels his heart twist. Edric is Arthur's nephew, the son of his elder brother, who died of fever 3 years past. The child looks at Jon with pure adoration, seeing only his milk brother and friend. He has no idea that the boy he plays with carries the blood of kings. "Would you like to try, Edric?" Arthur calls out, and the young boy's face lights up like the summer sun. Soon both children are wielding wooden swords under Arthur's watchful eye, their laughter echoing off the ancient stones. Jon takes naturally to the role of teacher, showing Edric how to hold his weapon and where to place his feet. The sight warms Arthur's heart even as it breaks it. The hidden prince trains his future protector without knowing the weight that will someday fall on both their shoulders. That evening, in Arthur's private chambers, Jon sits cross-legged on thick carpets, while his guardian reads from an old tome bound in red leather. The book speaks of dragons and the kings who rode them, of justice dispensed from the Iron Throne and the price of power. "Tell me about Prince Rhaegar again," Jon says, his voice soft in the candlelight. "Was he really as good as the stories say?" Arthur closes the book and looks into eyes that mirror those of his lost prince. "Rhaegar Targaryen was the finest man I ever knew. He was learned and just, kind to the lowborn and fair to his enemies. When he played his harp, even hardened knights wept at the beauty of it. But he lost the war," Jon points out with the brutal honesty of childhood. "The usurper killed him." The word usurper comes naturally to the boy's lips, as Arthur has taught him to think of Robert Baratheon. It is a dangerous game they play, shaping Jon's mind to see the world through Targaryen eyes, but it is necessary preparation for the future. "Rhaegar lost a single battle," Arthur corrects gently, "but his cause was just. Sometimes good men fall, so that better men may rise in their place." Jon traces patterns in the carpet with one finger, his young mind wrestling with concepts too heavy for his age. "Do you think he would have been proud of me? If I had really been his son, I mean." The innocent question cuts Arthur to the bone. "If only you knew, little prince. If only I could tell you the truth." "I think," Arthur says carefully, "that any father would be proud to call you son." Meanwhile, in the water gardens where Prince Doran Martell holds court among fountains and flowering trees, ravens bring news from King's Landing that makes the Prince of Dawn frown with concern. The parchment crackles as he reads of young Prince Joffrey's latest cruelties, of cats killed for sport and servants beaten for imagined slights. "The boy is his father's son in all the worst ways," Doran murmurs to his captain of guards, Areo Hota, "and his mother's son in ambition and spite." The letter also speaks of investigations, of questions asked about old loyalties and older grudges. Robert's reign has grown secure enough that he turns his attention to potential threats, real and imagined. Dawn remains a thorn in his side, proud and unbroken despite their defeat at the Trident. "My prince," Hotar rumbles in his deep voice, "perhaps it is time to consider sending messages to certain friends." The boy at Starfall grows older, and questions grow more pointed. Doran's dark eyes glitter with hidden knowledge. He has known about Arthur Dayne's survival since the second year of Robert's reign. But wisdom lies in patience and silence. The Sword of the Morning trains a child in his family's castle, and that child bears a striking resemblance to certain silver princes of old. But some secrets are worth more when kept than when revealed. "Not yet," Doran decides, setting the letter aside, "but soon. When the time is right, Dawn will remember its friends and its debts." Back at Starfall, Jon's education continues beyond sword work and history. Arthur teaches him to read the ancient languages, to understand the subtleties of law and governance, to see the patterns that connect all things. The boy learns quickly, his mind sharp as Valyrian steel and twice as flexible. But it is in the moments between lessons that Jon's true nature shows. When Edric falls and scrapes his knee, Jon bandages the wound with gentle hands. When a serving girl drops a tray and begins to cry, Jon helps her gather the scattered pieces without a word of reproach. When the castle's cats are threatened by a pack of wild dogs, Jon drives them off with stones and fierce determination. "He has the makings of a true king," Arthur writes in his private journal, hidden beneath a loose stone in his chamber wall. "Honor guides his hand, but fire burns in his heart. He would choose mercy over vengeance, justice over convenience. If the realm must have another Targaryen on the throne, let it be this one." One evening, as autumn settles over Dawn like a familiar cloak, Jon comes to Arthur with tears streaking his dusty cheeks. In his small hands, he holds the pieces of a wooden sword, split down its length during a particularly vigorous training session. "I broke it," Jon says, his voice thick with shame. "I was trying so hard to be strong like you, and I broke it." Arthur kneels beside him and takes the broken pieces, turning them over in his calloused hands. The wood has split clean, but not beyond repair. Like so many things in their lives, it can be made whole again with patience and skill. "Come," Arthur says, rising and heading toward the castle's forge. "Let us see what the smith can do with these pieces. Sometimes things must break before they can become what they were always meant to be." In the hot glow of the forge, they watch as the castle's blacksmith carefully joins the wooden pieces with thin bands of steel, reinforcing the breaks and making the sword stronger than before. Jon's eyes shine with wonder as he holds the reforged weapon, feeling its new weight and balance. "It's better now," Jon breathes, swinging the sword in careful arcs. "Stronger where it broke." Arthur watches him and thinks of another blade, broken by grief and reforged by purpose. Somewhere in his chambers, the pieces of the true Dawn wait for their own moment of rebirth. When Jon is ready, when he is worthy, that ancient steel will sing again in the hands of a rightful king. But for now, there is only a boy learning to be a man, a guardian teaching hard lessons wrapped in gentle words, and the slow turning of seasons that brings them all closer to a destiny written in fire and blood. The hidden prince grows stronger with each passing day. unaware that his very existence is treason, and his survival is the kingdom's greatest secret. The boy who the world knows as Jon looks at his reflection in the still waters of Starfall's fountain and sees a stranger staring back. At 12 years old, he stands tall for his age, his dark hair falling in waves that catch the morning light. But it is his eyes that trouble him most. Violet like Arthur's, like Edric's, yet somehow different, deeper. Older than his years should allow. "Why don't I look like the other Dornish children?" Jon asks for the 100th time, his voice carrying the edge of frustration that comes with approaching manhood. "My skin is too pale, my hair too dark, even my eyes are wrong." Arthur sets down the letter he has been reading, news from King's Landing, that speaks of tournaments and politics. The boy's questions grow sharper with each passing season, and the lies grow heavier on Arthur's tongue. "You look like your mother," Arthur says carefully, the words he has rehearsed for years. "She was different, beautiful, but not of dawn. My mother who died birthing me," Jon recites, his tone flat, "the woman you will never name because it brings you pain to speak of her." The accusation hangs between them like a sword. Arthur forces himself to meet those searching, violet eyes, hating the deception, but knowing it is still necessary. The boy is not ready for the truth. The world is not ready for the truth. "Some wounds never heal completely," Arthur replies, which is not entirely a lie. "Speaking of her, it is difficult." Jon turns away from the fountain, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I am your bastard son, born of some woman you loved and lost. Why must I carry the shame while you keep your silence?" "There is no shame in you," Arthur says fiercely, rising to catch Jon's shoulder. "You are the finest young man I know, true-born or not. Your birth does not define your worth." But Jon shrugs away from his touch, the familiar gesture that once brought comfort, now feeling like another lie. Easy words from a man who bears no bastard stigma. In the practice yard, Jon's frustration finds outlet in steel and speed. His wooden sword moves like lightning in his hands, each strike precise and powerful beyond his years. Edric struggles to keep pace, though the younger boy's skill has grown remarkable under Jon's patient teaching. "Yield!" Edric gasps, his sword arm trembling from the relentless assault. Jon steps back, his breathing steady despite the intensity of their bout. Around the yard's edge, knights and men-at-arms watch with open admiration. Word of the bastard's skill has spread through Dawn like wildfire, drawing visitors to Starfall who claim business with House Dayne but truly come to see the boy fight. "You're holding back," observes a new voice from the shade of the courtyard wall. Jon turns to see Prince Oberyn Martell emerge from the shadows, his dark eyes glittering with interest. The Red Viper moves with the fluid grace of a born killer, his hand resting casually on his spear's shaft. But it is the intensity of his stare that makes Jon's skin prickle with unease. "My prince?" Jon says, offering a respectful bow. "I did not know you had come to Starfall." Oberyn circles him like a hunting cat, studying every detail of Jon's face and bearing. "I heard tales of Arthur Dayne's bastard and his exceptional gifts. The stories do not do justice to the reality. I am pleased the tales amuse you, my prince." "Amuse?" Oberyn laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. "Oh, young Jon, I am not amused. I am intrigued. You fight like a man possessed, move like nobility born, and carry yourself with a pride that speaks of kings rather than bastards." Jon feels heat rise in his cheeks. "I know what I am, my prince. I need no reminders." "Do you?" Oberyn steps closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Jon can hear. "I wonder what you truly know of yourself, boy, and what stories you have been told to keep you content with crumbs when you were born to feast." That evening, in Arthur's chambers, the weight of deception presses down like a physical thing. Jon sits across from his guardian, their evening meal growing cold between them as silence stretches taut as a bowstring. "Prince Oberyn knows something," Jon says finally. "The way he looked at me, the things he said. He knows something you are not telling me." Arthur's jaw tightens. Oberyn Martell sees plots and secrets everywhere he looks. It is his nature. But this time he is right, isn't he? Jon leans forward, his violet eyes burning with intensity. "There is something about my birth, about my mother, that you hide from me. I am not simply your bastard son." The truth sits on Arthur's tongue, like poison, begging to be released. How easy it would be to tell him everything, to speak of silver princes and dying promises, of dragon's blood and a crown that waits across the narrow sea. But the boy is only 12, and knowledge is a blade that cuts both ways. "You are my son in all the ways that matter," Arthur says instead. "The blood in your veins does not change that." Jon studies his face for long moments, searching for cracks in the careful mask Arthur has worn for 12 years. When he speaks again, his voice carries a dangerous edge. "Today I heard a serving girl talking about the false king in King's Landing. She spoke of Robert Baratheon as a usurper who stole his crown through murder and treachery." Jon pauses, watching Arthur's reaction. "You have taught me that legitimate rule comes from just claim, not conquest. If Robert is indeed false, then who has the true right to the Iron Throne? The question is a trap, carefully laid by a mind too sharp for its own good." Arthur recognizes the cunning that runs in Jon's blood. Not just Targaryen fire, but the wolf's intelligence that comes from his mother's line. "The Targaryens ruled for 3 centuries, Arthur answers carefully. "Some say their bloodline carries the only legitimate claim. Others believe that conquest creates its own right. The truth is complicated." "But if a true Targaryen still lived," Jon presses, "if one of royal blood survived Robert's purges, would you support their claim?" Arthur's heart hammers against his ribs. The boy circles closer to the truth with each word, driven by instincts he cannot yet understand. "Such questions are dangerous, Jon. Men have died for speaking treason, less boldly than this." "I am not afraid of danger," Jon replies, and in that moment he sounds exactly like Rhaegar. "I am afraid of living in ignorance, while the realm suffers under false rule." Meanwhile, ravens bring news from Winterfell that sets Arthur's teeth on edge. Lord Eddard Stark has acknowledged a bastard son, born during the war and raised in the castle alongside his true-born children. The boy's name is Jon Snow, and he grows tall and strong in the North's cold halls. The lie has grown legs of its own, spreading across the 7 kingdoms until even Dawn knows of Ned Stark's supposed shame. Arthur reads the reports with growing unease, wondering how long such deceptions can hold when the truth has a way of surfacing like a corpse in still water. "Is something wrong?" Jon asks, noticing Arthur's grim expression as he studies the parchment. "News from the north," Arthur replies, setting the letter aside. "Lord Stark's bastard son grows to manhood in Winterfell." Jon's face goes very still. "Another bastard bearing my name. It is a common name for base-born children." "Is it?" Jon stands and moves to the window, where night falls over Starfall like a familiar cloak. Or is there more to that particular choice than coincidence? Arthur has no answer that would not lead to dangerous ground. Instead, he joins Jon at the window and watches the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those points of light lies the path to Jon's true destiny, but the time for walking it has not yet come. "You ask difficult questions, Jon," Arthur says quietly, "questions that may not have simple answers." "Then give me complex ones," Jon replies, his reflection ghost-pale in the window glass. "I am not a child anymore, and I will not be content with bedtime stories much longer." Arthur looks at the boy. No, the young man, standing beside him and sees the future pressing against the present like a tide against a seawall. Soon the walls will break, and all their careful deceptions will be swept away. When that day comes, Arthur prays he will have given Jon the strength to weather the storm. But for tonight, there is only a guardian and his ward watching the stars wheel overhead, both carrying secrets too heavy for their hearts to bear. 2 years have passed since Jon's 12th name day, and the boy has grown into a young man whose questions cut deeper with each passing season. At 14, he stands nearly as tall as Arthur, his shoulders broad from years of sword work, and his violet eyes sharp with intelligence that misses nothing. The dark hair that once marked him as different now falls past his shoulders in waves that catch the dawnish sunlight like spun shadow. In the water gardens, where Prince Doran Martell holds court among fountains and flowering trees, a conversation unfolds that will change the course of kingdoms. The Prince of Dawn sits in his wheeled chair, his gouty legs wrapped in silk, while Arthur Dayne stands before him like a man facing judgment. "You cannot continue this charade much longer," Doran says quietly, his dark eyes fixed on Arthur's face. The boy grows restless, his questions grow sharper. Soon he will demand answers you cannot give. Arthur shifts uncomfortably, his hand instinctively moving to where Dawn once hung at his side. He is safe as he is. Hidden. Protected. Is that not enough? Safe. Doran laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. Arthur, I have known the truth since your 2nd year at Starfall. Did you think the Prince of Dawn would not recognize Rhaegar Targaryen's son when he saw him? The boy grows more like his father with each passing day. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. For 14 years he has carried the weight of Jon's secret alone, never knowing that Doran's protection came from knowledge rather than mere courtesy to House Dayne. You knew, Arthur breathes. All this time you knew. I suspected from the moment you arrived with a dark-haired infant and a story of survival against impossible odds. I confirmed it when the boy began to walk and talk. The resemblance to Rhaegar is unmistakable to those who remember. Doran wheels his chair closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Arthur can hear. The realm suffers under Robert's rule. The king grows fat and drunk, while his queen's children show the worst traits of both their bloodlines. Prince Joffrey tortures cats for sport and beats servants for imagined slights. Is this the legacy you would preserve? I gave my word to protect him, Arthur says fiercely, not to make him a target for Robert's rage. But what if he need not be a target? Doran's eyes glitter with the patient cunning that has kept Dawn independent for centuries. What if he could be a king? Dawn remembers its loyalty to House Targaryen. The Reach has reason to resent Robert's heavy taxes. Even the North grows weary of southern politics. Arthur stares at him, seeing the shape of a conspiracy that has been growing in shadows while he focused only on keeping one boy safe. You speak of war. I speak of justice, Doran corrects. The rightful king sits in exile across the narrow sea while a usurper's line breeds madness on the Iron Throne. Your prince, for that is what he is, Arthur, whether you acknowledge it or not, could unite the realm under a just rule. He is 14 years old, Arthur protests, a boy who knows nothing of his true heritage. You would make him a weapon in your games? I would make him what he was born to be, Doran replies. The question is whether you will help him claim his destiny or continue this fiction until it destroys you both. From the garden's edge, hidden behind a screen of flowering vines, Jon listens to every word with growing amazement and fury. He has come seeking Edric, who practices his letters with Doran's Maester, but instead he discovers that his entire life has been built on lies, wrapped in greater lies. Targaryen, prince, rightful king. The words echo in his mind like thunder as he creeps away from the gardens, his heart pounding against his ribs. For 14 years, Arthur has lied to him about everything that matters. Not a bastard, but a prince. Not the son of some unnamed woman, but heir to the Iron Throne itself. The confrontation comes that evening in Arthur's chambers, where maps of the Seven Kingdoms spread across the table like accusations. Jon bursts through the door without ceremony, his violet eyes blazing with Targaryen fire. "Liar," he snarls, the word cutting through the air like a blade. 14 years of lies, and you dare speak to me of honor? Arthur looks up from the parchments, his face going pale as he recognizes the fury in Jon's voice. "Jon, what?" "I heard you," Jon cuts him off, moving to stand over the table where Arthur sits. "I heard everything. Prince Doran knows the truth about me, and you have been lying since the day you carried me from that tower." For a long moment, silence stretches between them like a chasm. Arthur sets down his quill with careful precision, his mind racing through options and finding none that lead anywhere good. "How much did you hear?" Arthur asks quietly. "Enough." Jon's voice cracks slightly, betrayal and anger warring in his tone. "Enough to know that I am not your bastard son. Enough to know that my blood is royal, not common. Enough to know that everything you have ever told me about myself is a lie." Arthur stands slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Some lies serve to protect rather than deceive. What I told you, what you told me, was that I was base-born," Jon shouts, his composure finally shattering. "You let me carry that shame for 14 years while you knew the truth of my heritage. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" The pain in Jon's voice cuts Arthur deeper than any sword. He reaches out instinctively, but Jon steps back, his face a mask of wounded fury. "I can explain," Arthur says desperately. "There are reasons." "Reasons?" Jon laughs bitterly. "What reasons could justify lying to a child about his very identity? What reasons make 14 years of deception acceptable?" Arthur sinks back into his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 39 years. "Your safety. Your life. If Robert Baratheon knew you lived, he would move heaven and earth to see you dead. The secret was not just yours to bear. It was everyone's who cared about keeping you alive." "And what of my choice?" Jon demands. "What of my right to know who I really am?" "You were a child," Arthur says quietly. "Children do not choose their own destinies. Men do that for them, and hope they choose wisely." Jon stares at him for long moments, his chest heaving with emotion. When he speaks again, his voice is cold as winter wind. "Then tell me now. Tell me the truth, all of it. Who am I really? Whose blood runs in my veins?" Arthur closes his eyes, feeling the weight of 14 years pressing down on him like stones. When he opens them again, Jon sees something he has never seen before, uncertainty in the man who has always seemed invincible. "You are the son of noble blood," Arthur begins carefully. "Your father was a great man, a prince who died in the war. Your mother loved him, and their union produced you." "A prince," Jon repeats, testing the word. "What prince?" "That," Arthur says heavily, "is a story for another day. For now, it is enough that you know you were born to something greater than what you have been told." Jon's eyes narrow. Still more lies. Still more half-truths. Before Arthur can respond, a voice from the doorway interrupts their confrontation. "Perhaps," says Prince Oberyn Martell, stepping into the chamber with his usual fluid grace. "This is a conversation that requires a different perspective." Both Arthur and Jon turn to face the Red Viper, who closes the door behind him with deliberate care. His dark eyes move between them, reading the tension like a book written in familiar ink. "You have questions about noble blood and royal princes," Oberyn says to Jon. "And you," he turns to Arthur, "have answers you are afraid to give. Perhaps I can help bridge that gap." "This is not your concern, Oberyn," Arthur warns, but the Dornish prince waves him off. "Everything that happens in Dorne is my concern," Oberyn replies, "especially when it involves a young man whose resemblance to certain silver princes grows stronger with each passing year. Jon's breath catches. You knew too? I suspected, Oberyn admits. Your guardian is remarkably skilled at keeping secrets, but some truths have a way of showing themselves to those who know where to look. He moves to pour himself wine from Arthur's sideboard, his movements casual, despite the weight of the conversation. Tell me, young Jon, what do you know of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen? The name hits Jon like lightning. He has heard it in Arthur's stories, spoken with reverence and sorrow, but never connected to himself. Never tied to the royal blood that apparently flows in his veins. He was the crown prince, Jon says slowly. He died at the Trident, killed by Robert Baratheon. Arthur served him and loved him like a brother. Oberyn nods, his eyes glittering. All true. But did you know that Rhaegar was also a man who inspired great loyalty, who dreamed of justice and fairness for the realm, who played the harp so beautifully that even his enemies wept to hear it? Why are you telling me this? Jon asks, though something deep in his chest responds to the stories like a tuning fork struck true. Because, Oberyn says, meeting his eyes directly, a man should know the caliber of his bloodline, and because the blood of great men calls to greatness, whether they know their heritage or not. Arthur watches this exchange with growing alarm, seeing how Jon drinks in every word about Rhaegar like a man dying of thirst. The truth hovers between them, closer now than it has ever been, and Arthur fears what will happen when it finally comes to light. Enough, Arthur says, standing abruptly. This conversation has gone far enough. But Jon turns to him with new steel in his voice. No, Arthur. For the first time in my life, someone is telling me truths instead of comfortable lies. I want to hear more. The words fall between them like a blade, cutting the bonds that have held them together for 14 years. Arthur sees his ward pulling away from him, drawn toward a truth that will change everything, and knows that the reckoning he has dreaded for so long has finally come. The boy is 16 now, and the man he will become shows in every line of his tall frame. Jon stands before the ancient weirwood that grows in Starfall's Godswood, its bone-white bark carved with faces older than memory. Dawn rests across his palms like captured starlight, its milky blade singing with each breath of wind that stirs the red leaves overhead. 2 years have passed since the confrontation in Arthur's chambers, 2 years of careful rebuilding between guardian and ward. The partial truths have settled between them like stones in still water, heavy but no longer cutting. Jon knows he is highborn, knows his blood carries the weight of princes, but the full scope of his heritage remains Arthur's most closely guarded secret. Until today. Are you certain you are ready? Arthur asks, his violet eyes studying Jon's face for any sign of doubt. Once you take Dawn as yours, there will be no going back. The sword chooses its bearer, and the bearer must be worthy of its legacy. Jon's grip tightens on the ancient blade. For weeks, he has undergone the trials that House Dayne requires of any who would claim the title Sword of the Morning. Combat against seasoned knights, tests of honor and judgment, ordeals of strength and will. Others have tried and failed. Distant cousins and ambitious lordlings who thought Dawn's power could be claimed through birthright alone. But Jon succeeded where they failed. His sword arm proved stronger, his resolve deeper, his understanding of justice clearer than any who came before. Even Sir Edric, now 13 and skilled beyond his years, could not match Jon's prowess when they faced each other in the final trial. I am ready, Jon says, and his voice carries the certainty of a man, not a boy. Arthur nods slowly, then draws his own sword, a fine blade of castle-forged steel, but nothing compared to the weapon Jon holds. Then let us begin the ceremony that will make you what you were always meant to be. The ritual is older than the coming of the Andals, older perhaps than the first men themselves. Arthur speaks the ancient words, while Jon kneels before the weirwood, Dawn laid across his thighs like an offering. The blade seems to pulse with inner light, responding to something in Jon's blood that even Arthur does not fully understand. "Do you swear to bear this blade with honor?" Arthur intones, his voice echoing off the Godswood's ancient stones. "I swear," Jon replies. "Do you swear to protect the innocent and defend the just?" "I swear." "Do you swear to carry the legacy of House Dayne with dignity, regardless of your birth or bloodline?" Jon's voice trembles slightly. "I swear." Arthur places his hand on Jon's shoulder, and for a moment the years fall away. He sees again the infant he carried from the Tower of Joy, the boy who called him Artie, with such innocent love, the young man who forgave him for years of necessary lies. "Then rise, Jon of House Dayne," Arthur says formally. "Rise, sword of the morning." When Jon stands, dawn seems to blaze brighter in his hands, and Arthur knows with absolute certainty that the blade has chosen truly. Whatever blood flows in Jon's veins, whatever destiny awaits him, he is worthy of the ancient sword that has defended the innocent for 1,000 years. Meanwhile, ravens bring news from across the narrow sea that sets the noble houses of Westeros to whispering. Word spreads of a Targaryen princess who has wed a Dothraki Cole, of armies gathering on the eastern grasslands, of ancient powers stirring in lands long thought tamed. Daenerys Targaryen, last daughter of the Mad King, grows in strength and ambition, while Robert Baratheon grows fat and sick in King's Landing. But more immediate concerns arrive at Starfall in the person of Tyrion Lannister, who comes with a small retinue and letters bearing the royal seal. The youngest son of Tywin Lannister sits his horse with practiced ease, despite his short stature, his mismatched eyes taking in every detail of Starfall's defences. "Lord Jon," Tyrion says with elaborate courtesy as they meet in the castle's courtyard. "Or should I say, Sir Jon, I hear congratulations are in order for your recent elevation to Sword of the Morning." Jon inclines his head politely, dawn hanging at his side like captured moonlight. "Lord Tyrion, to what do we owe the honour of your visit?" Tyrion's smile is sharp as a blade. "Curiosity mostly. The Crown has received interesting reports about House Dayne's newest knight. A bastard who fights like a prince, I'm told. A young man whose skill with a blade has become the stuff of legend across Dorne. Skill is earned through practice, my lord. Birth has little to do with it." "Ah, but birth has everything to do with it, doesn't it?" Tyrion dismounts with fluid grace, his eyes never leaving Jon's face. "The way you carry yourself, the way men follow your lead, the way you speak of justice and honour as if they were more than pretty words. These are not the habits of common blood." Arthur steps forward, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. "Is there some point to this questioning, Lord Tyrion? Or do you merely wish to compliment our hospitality?" Tyrion laughs, a sound like silver bells. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of questioning House Dayne's hospitality. After all, you've been so very accommodating to travellers over the years. Some might say generously so. The threat hangs in the air like smoke, subtle but unmistakable." Arthur and Jon exchange glances, both recognizing the danger in Tyrion's words. The dwarf knows something, or suspects it, and his presence here is no accident. That night, after Tyrion has been housed with all proper courtesy, Arthur finds Jon standing on Starfall's highest balcony, staring out across the Torrentine toward the distant sea. Dawn rests against the stone parapet, its blade catching starlight like trapped fire. "He knows," Jon says without turning around. "Or suspects. Either way, our time grows short." Arthur joins him at the railing, his weathered hands gripping the stone. "There are always those who suspect. Tyrion Lannister makes his living by knowing other men's secrets." "But this feels different." Jon turns to face him, and in the moonlight, his resemblance to Rhaegar is almost overwhelming. "Tell me, Arthur. Tell me the truth, all of it. If our enemies close in, I deserve to know what I'm fighting for." The moment Arthur has dreaded for 16 years has finally arrived. He looks at the young man before him. no longer the helpless infant he carried from the Tower of Joy, but a knight worthy of Dawn's legacy, and knows that the time for half-truths has ended. Your father, Arthur begins slowly, was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne. Jon's breath catches, but he remains silent, waiting for the rest. Your mother was Lyanna Stark, sister to Lord Eddard. They loved each other truly, though the realm saw only scandal and abduction. You were born at the Tower of Joy, where I and 2 other knights stood guard while she labored. The words pour out like water through a broken dam. The battle, Lyanna's death, the promises made in blood and tears, the flight to Starfall, and the years of hiding that followed. Jon listens without interruption, his face a mask of controlled emotion. When Arthur finishes, silence stretches between them like a chasm. Jon stares out at the stars, his mind reeling with the implications of what he has learned. Aegon, he says finally, testing his true name on his lips. Aegon Targaryen. The 6th of that name, if you choose to claim it. Jon, Aegon, turns the revelation over in his mind like a puzzle piece that finally fits. The dreams that have haunted him, visions of silver princes and dying women. The way Dawn sang when he first touched it, as if recognizing something in his blood. The strange certainty he has always felt that his destiny lay somewhere beyond Starfall's walls. Robert Baratheon would kill me if he knew, Jon says, without hesitation, and probably everyone who helped keep you alive. Jon nods slowly, accepting the weight of the knowledge. When he speaks again, his voice carries a new edge of steel. Then Robert Baratheon is my enemy, and Tyrion Lannister is his agent, sent to confirm suspicions that grow too dangerous to ignore. Arthur sees the transformation happening before his eyes, the boy becoming a man, the hidden prince accepting his birthright, but he also sees the fire in those violet eyes, the Targaryen rage that could burn the world if not carefully controlled. What will you do? Arthur asks quietly. Jon grips Dawn's hilt, feeling the ancient steel's weight and balance. What I was born to do. What Rhaegar would have done, if he had lived. He turns to face Arthur fully, and in that moment he looks every inch a king. I will reclaim my throne. The wind picks up, setting the castle's banners to snapping in the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, or perhaps it is only the wind through the stones. But Arthur hears in that sound the echo of war horns, the promise of battles yet to come, and the beginning of the end of Robert Baratheon's reign. The hidden prince has finally awakened, and the realm will never be the same. The raven arrives at dawn, its black wings cutting through the morning mist like an omen of death. Arthur breaks the wax seal with trembling fingers, while Jon watches from across the solar. Dawn laid bare on the table between them like a promise of war. The parchment crackles as Arthur unfolds it, and his face goes pale as winter stone. Robert is dead, Arthur says, his voice barely above a whisper. Killed by a boar while hunting in the Kingswood. Prince Joffrey has taken the crown. Jon feels something shift deep in his chest, like the moment before an avalanche begins. For 16 years, Robert Baratheon has been the shadow hanging over his existence, the usurper king whose hatred would have meant death for any Targaryen heir. Now that shadow has lifted, but in its place comes something far more dangerous, opportunity. How did he die? Jon asks, moving to read over Arthur's shoulder. The details are unclear. Some say wine, others blame the boar itself. But listen to this. Arthur points to a line near the bottom of the letter. Lord Eddard Stark has been arrested for treason, accused of questioning Prince Joffrey's legitimacy. The words hit Jon like a physical blow. Ned Stark, the man who helped keep his secret for 16 years, now faces the headsman's block for doing what honor demanded. The irony tastes bitter as gall. The man who protected the true prince now dies for challenging the false one. "We have to help him," Jon says immediately. Arthur looks up from the letter, his violet eyes dark with grief and calculation. "Jon, by the time any help could reach King's Landing, Lord Stark will be dead or free. The game moves too quickly now for sentiment." "Sentiment?" Jon's voice carries a dangerous edge. "This is honor, Arthur. This is debt. Ned Stark sacrificed everything to keep me safe, and now he suffers for revealing truths we have hidden." Arthur sees the fire building in Jon's eyes, the Targaryen rage that could burn kingdoms if left unchecked. But he also sees something else, the steel of a king who understands that power must serve justice, not merely ambition. "What do you propose?" Arthur asks quietly. Jon moves to the window where Starfall's banners snap in the morning wind. Beyond the castle walls, dawn stretches toward the horizon, like a promise of armies waiting to be called. "I propose we stop hiding," Jon says, his voice carrying the weight of decision. "Robert is dead. His heir is a bastard born of incest, who rules through cruelty and fear. The realm bleeds while we sit in shadows, protecting a secret that serves no one." "The risk? The risk was hiding," Jon cuts him off, turning from the window with eyes that blaze like violet fire. "The risk was letting evil men rule while the rightful king lived in exile. No more, Arthur. No more." Arthur stares at the young man before him and sees the transformation complete. This is no longer the boy who called him Artie, or even the youth who struggled with partial truths. This is Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name, and he has decided to claim his birthright. "If we do this," Arthur says slowly, "there is no going back. Once you reveal yourself, every enemy of House Targaryen will hunt you to the ends of the earth." "Let them come," Jon replies, his hand moving instinctively to Dawn's hilt. "I have the blood of dragons, and the greatest knight in Westeros at my side. Let them all come." By midday, ravens fly from Starfall's rookery like a flock of dark messengers. Jon himself writes the letters, his hand steady despite the magnitude of what he sets in motion. To Stannis Baratheon on Dragonstone, claiming kinship through shared Targaryen blood and offering alliance against the usurper line. To the Lords of the North, revealing the truth of Ned Stark's bastard and calling them to honor their oaths. To the great houses who remember when dragons ruled with justice rather than madness. But the most important message goes not by raven, but by swift horse to the water gardens. Prince Doran receives the summons with the patience of a man who has waited decades for this moment. When he reads Jon's words, "I am ready to claim what is mine," his aged face breaks into the first genuine smile his guards have seen in years. "Send word to every holdfast in Dorne," Doran commands from his wheeled chair. "The dragon has awakened, and Dorne remembers its oaths." Within hours, the courtyard of Starfall fills with riders bearing the banners of every major house in Dorne. Sir Edric Dayne, now 13 and tall for his age, stands at Jon's right hand as the assembly gathers. His young face is grave with the weight of history unfolding. When the last of the lords have arrived, Jon steps forward onto the dais, where the lords of Starfall have stood for 1,000 years. Dawn hangs at his side, its pale blade catching the afternoon light like captured starfire. But it is not the sword that commands attention. It is the young man who wears it, whose bearing speaks of kings despite his years. "Lords and knights of Dorne," Jon begins, his voice carrying clearly across the crowded yard. "You know me as Jon, bastard of House Dayne. You have seen me trained, watched me earn the right to bear Dorne, accepted me as Sword of the Morning despite my birth." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. These men have indeed watched Jon grow from boy to knight, have seen his skill with blade and his fairness in judgment. But they sense something larger building in his words. "Today I ask you to know me by another name," Jon continues, and Arthur feels his heart hammer against his ribs. "I am Aegon Targaryen, 6th of that name, son of Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark, rightful king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. The silence that follows is absolute. Then Lord Blackmont steps forward, his weathered face creased with wonder. "By the Seven," he breathes. "The resemblance. How did we not see it?" "Because you were not meant to," Jon replies simply. "Until now. Robert Baratheon is dead, and his bastard sits the Iron Throne while the realm burns. I ask you now, will Dorne support the dragon's return?" The answer comes not in words, but in the sound of 100 swords sliding from their sheaths. Steel rings against steel as every blade in the courtyard rises in salute, and the cry that goes up echoes off Starfall's ancient stones like thunder. "Aegon! Aegon! Aegon!" Arthur watches with tears streaming down his face as his ward, his prince, accepts the homage of Dorne's finest. This is what Rhaegar dreamed of, what Lyanna died hoping for. Their son, acknowledged at last, taking his first steps toward the Iron Throne. But the celebration is short-lived. Even as the Lords of Dorne pledge their swords, ravens bring news that chills the blood. Lord Eddard Stark is dead, beheaded on the steps of the great Sept of Baelor for the crime of speaking truth. His son Robb has called the banners and marched south, styling himself king in the north. Stannis Baratheon has declared from Dragonstone that Joffrey is no true king, while his brother Renly moves to claim the crown with the strength of the Reach behind him. The War of 5 Kings has begun, and now it becomes the War of 6 Kings, as Aegon Targaryen prepares to stake his claim with Dornish steel. That evening, in the privacy of Arthur's chambers, master and student train together as they have for 16 years. But now their practice has deadly purpose. Each stroke of blade against blade rings with the promise of battles to come. Jon moves with fluid grace, Dawn singing through the air like captured lightning, while Arthur matches him, stroke for stroke, with skills honed over decades of war. "You fight like your father," Arthur says, as they break apart, both breathing hard from the intensity of their bout. "But you think like your mother. That combination may be what saves the realm." Jon lowers Dawn, its blade gleaming with sweat and starlight from the open window. "I dream of them sometimes, Silver Prince and Wolf Maiden. They tell me the crown is not a prize to be won, but a burden to be borne. Will you be ready to bear it?" Jon looks out at the night sky, where stars wheel overhead like distant armies. Somewhere beyond the horizon, 5 kings make war while the people suffer. Somewhere in the east, his aunt gathers power with dragons at her side. Somewhere in the north, winter approaches with terrors beyond imagining. "I have to be," Jon says quietly. "The realm deserves better than Joffrey Baratheon's cruelty, or the endless war his bastard reign will bring. If I am truly Rhaegar's son, then I must be what he would have been, just, merciful, strong enough to unite the 7 kingdoms in peace." Arthur grips his shoulder with a hand that has guided him since infancy. "Then we ride north, my king. We ride to war." Outside Starfall's walls, campfires begin to bloom like orange flowers as the army of Dawn gathers. 10,000 spears, they say. 10,000 swords sworn to the dragon banner. It is not enough to conquer the 7 kingdoms, but it is enough to begin the work of justice. The hidden prince has become the Dragon King, and his flight toward the Iron Throne begins with the rising of tomorrow's sun. The army of Dawn moves north, like a river of steel and silk, 10,000 spears glinting in the morning sun as they wind through the passes of the Red Mountains. Jon rides at their head on a destrier black as night, Dawn hanging at his side like captured starlight. The dragon banner snaps above him in the mountain wind, 3 red dragons on a field of black, the arms he was born to bear. But it is not the sight of his banners that weighs on Jon's heart as they climb toward the Reach. It is the letter that arrived 3 days past, bearing the seal of the direwolf and news that cuts deeper than any blade. Ned Stark is dead, beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept for the crime of serving truth over power. The man who carried Jon's secret for 17 years, who sacrificed his honor to protect a Targaryen prince, has paid the ultimate price for his integrity. Arthur rides beside him, his weathered face grim beneath the shadow of his helm. He has watched Jon struggle with grief and rage in equal measure, has seen the young king wrestle with the knowledge that good men die while evil ones prosper. It is a lesson every ruler must learn, but that does not make it easier to bear. He knew the risks, Arthur says quietly, as they crest another ridge. Lord Stark always knew that protecting you might cost him everything. He made that choice freely. Did he? Jon's voice carries the bitter edge of self-doubt. Or did I make it for him the moment I was born? Every man who dies in this war dies because of choices I made before I drew breath. Every man who dies in this war dies because Robert Baratheon chose conquest over justice 17 years ago, Arthur replies firmly. You did not start this conflict, Jon. You are merely the instrument by which it might end. Behind them, the army stretches like a steel serpent through the mountain passes. Lords Blackmont and Manwoody ride with the vanguard, their faces hard with the prospect of war. Prince Oberyn himself leads the cavalry, his spear bright with poison and his dark eyes bright with anticipation. These are the men who remember when dragons ruled with justice rather than madness, who have waited decades for the chance to see a true king on the Iron Throne. Meanwhile, in the great hall of Riverrun, another king holds court beneath banners of grey and white. Robb Stark sits in his grandfather's chair, barely 17, but bearing the weight of the North's independence on his young shoulders. Around him gather the lords who declared him king in the North. The Great Jon with his booming voice, Lady Mormont fierce as the bears on her sigil, the Blackfish sharp as his brother Brandon ever was. But it is the letter in Robb's hands that commands his attention now, its words so impossible that he has read them thrice and still cannot fully comprehend their meaning. The parchment bears no seal, but the handwriting is elegant, educated, and the content. He claims to be Jon Snow, Robb says, his voice echoing strangely in the great hall. The bastard brother I grew up hearing stories about. The son Ned Stark, supposedly fathered during the war and left to die at the Tower of Joy. The Great Jon shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Your father spoke of him sometimes, when the wine had loosened his tongue. Said the boy died with his mother, wherever she was. But this letter, Robb holds up the parchment with shaking hands. This letter claims he lives, claims he was raised in Dorne under another name, claims he is not Ned Stark's bastard at all, but Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and my aunt Lyanna. Silence falls over the hall like a shroud. Lady Catelyn steps forward from where she has been standing beside Robb's chair, her face pale as winter snow. It could be a deception, she says carefully. The Dornish are cunning. They might seek to weaken us with false claims and forged kinship. But what if it is not? Robb asks, and his voice cracks slightly with the weight of possibility. What if my father kept this secret for 17 years? What if Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, truly lives? The questions hang in the air like smoke from a dying fire. If the letter speaks truth, then Robb's claim to the North must be measured against a dragon's claim to all 7 kingdoms. If Jon Snow is truly Aegon Targaryen, then the bastard brother of stories becomes the rightful king of Westeros. But such questions must wait, for even as Robb puzzles over impossible letters, Jon's army emerges from the Red Mountains into the green fields of the Reach. Here the banners change, the 3-headed dragon replaced by the golden rose of Tyrell, as scouts bring word of Lannister forces moving to intercept them. The battle comes at dawn in a field of summer roses, where Lord Randall Tarley has drawn up 5,000 men beneath the lion banners of Casterly Rock. It is Jon's first true test of arms, his first chance to prove that he can lead men into battle as well as inspire them with words. Stay close, Arthur murmurs as they form their battle lines. Watch for the moment when the tide turns. That is when kings are made or broken. Jon nods, his hand tight on Dawn's grip. Around him, the spears of Dawn gleam like a steel forest, while behind them, the cavalry waits for the charge that will break the Lannister line. Prince Oberyn rides up and down the ranks, his voice carrying words of encouragement in the old tongue of Dawn. "For the dragon!" Oberyn calls out, his spear raised high. "For justice and the rightful king!" "For Aegon!" the cry comes back from 10,000 throats. "For the dragon reborn!" The charge, when it comes, is like thunder rolling across the earth. Jon spurs his destrier forward, with Dawn blazing in his hand, the ancient sword singing as it cuts through the morning air. Around him, the Knights of Dawn surge like a tide of steel, their war cries echoing off the distant hills. Lord Tarly's line holds for precious moments before beginning to buckle. These are good men, soldiers trained in the crucible of border wars, but they face the fury of Dawn unleashed after decades of patience. Jon cuts down a knight in Lannister gold, Dawn parting armor like silk, and feels something awaken in his blood. Not rage, but purpose. This is what he was born for. This is justice made manifest. "The boy fights like his father," Arthur shouts to Prince Oberyn as they watch Jon carve through the enemy line. But he shows mercy where Rhaegar might have shown only fire. Indeed, as the Lannister resistance crumbles, Jon calls for quarter rather than slaughter. His voice carries across the field, commanding his men to spare those who yield and protect the wounded, regardless of their banners. It is a king's voice, Arthur realizes with fierce pride. The voice of a ruler who understands that today's enemies might become tomorrow's subjects. By noon, the field belongs to Dawn, and Lord Tarly's survivors march away under terms that grant them safe passage to King's Landing. Jon stands among the dying roses, Dawn still bright in his hand, despite the blood that stains its blade. Around him, his men gather the wounded and count their dead, fewer than 100, against 3 times that number for the Lions. "A good first battle," Prince Oberyn observes, cleaning poison from his spear point. "You fought with honor and won with strategy. Rhaegar would be proud." Jon looks out across the field where his banner flies above captured ground and feels the weight of kingship settling on his shoulders like a cloak. Somewhere to the north, Robb Stark struggles with letters and legends. Somewhere to the east, Stannis Baratheon gathers his strength on Dragonstone. Somewhere in King's Landing, a bastard boy plays at being king while the realm bleeds. But here, in this field of roses and steel, Aegon Targaryen has won his first victory. The dragon has awakened, and his flight toward the Iron Throne has begun in earnest. That evening, as the army makes camp in the captured field, a raven arrives, bearing the seal of the running wolf. Jon breaks the wax with fingers that still tremble from battle shock and reads words that make his heart soar with hope. "I do not know if you are my brother or my king," Robb has written in his careful hand. "But if you are truly Jon Snow, if you are truly Aegon Targaryen, then we must meet and speak of many things. I will wait for you at Riverrun, where our grandfather once ruled, and where truth must finally be spoken." Jon looks up from the letter to find Arthur watching him with knowing eyes. "He believes," Arthur says simply. "Your brother believes." "Then we ride for Riverrun," Jon decides. "We ride to meet the king in the north and discover what manner of alliance can be forged between dragon and wolf." The stars wheel overhead as the army of Dawn settles into rest, but Jon remains wakeful, staring at the letter that may change everything. Tomorrow they will march north again, following roads that lead toward destiny and a reunion 17 years in the making. The ghost of Jon Snow rides toward his true brother, while the dragon Aegon Targaryen flies toward a throne that awaits his claim. The ancient stones of Riverrun have witnessed many momentous meetings through the centuries, but few as laden with consequence as the gathering that takes place beneath its great hall's vaulted ceiling. 2 kings sit across from each other at the carved table where Hoster Tully once held court, one crowned with iron and independence, the other bearing only a sword, but claiming dominion over all 7 kingdoms. Jon enters the hall with Dawn at his side and Arthur at his back, his violet eyes taking in the assembled lords of the North and Riverlands. Here stands the great Jon, massive and bearded, his hand resting on his sword hilt. There sits Lady Mormont, small but fierce as the bears on her banners. The Blackfish watches from the shadows, his weathered face giving nothing away, while Catelyn Stark stands behind her son's chair like a protective wolf. But it is Robb who commands Jon's attention, this brother-cousin stranger whose face mirrors his own despite their different upbringings. At 17, Robb has grown tall and strong, his auburn hair catching the light from the hall's great windows. When their eyes meet across the ancient stones, Jon sees recognition flicker there, not of identity, but of blood calling to blood across impossible circumstances. "So," Robb says, his young voice carrying the weight of kingship, "you claim to be Jon Snow, the bastard brother I heard stories about but never met." "I claim to be many things," Jon replies, moving to stand before the high table with the measured grace that Arthur taught him. "Jon Snow was one name I bore. Aegon Targaryen is another. Which truth would you prefer to hear?" The hall erupts in murmurs at the bold declaration. These northern lords have spent their lives hearing tales of Targaryen cruelty and madness, of dragons that burned whole families for defying the throne. But the young man before them bears Dawn with honor and speaks with stark directness, creating a contradiction that challenges everything they thought they knew. "Prove it," the great Jon rumbles, his massive frame rising from his chair. "Any pretender could claim royal blood. Show us something that proves you are who you say." Jon looks to Arthur, who nods almost imperceptibly. From within his traveling cloak, the former King's Guard produces a small object wrapped in silk, a silver locket bearing the engraved arms of House Stark. Arthur opens it with reverent fingers to reveal a pressed blue rose, faded but unmistakably real. "Lyanna Stark wore this at Harrenhal," Arthur says quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "She gave it to Prince Rhaegar when they spoke their vows in the sight of gods and men. I carried it from the Tower of Joy, along with her son." Catelyn's face goes white as fresh snow. She reaches out with trembling fingers to touch the locket, her eyes filling with tears as she recognizes her good sister's cherished possession. "I remember this," she whispers. "Lyanna wore it always, even when she was Brandon's bride-to-be. She kept this locket close to her heart." The silence that follows carries the weight of revelation. Here is proof beyond words or claims, a physical link to the aunt Jon never knew and the love that created him. Robb stares at the faded rose as if seeing the past made manifest. "If this is true," Robb says slowly, his voice thick with emotion, "then you are not just my father's supposed bastard. You are my cousin by blood and my king by right." "I am your brother in all the ways that matter," Jon replies, stepping closer to the high table. "Blood of Stark flows in my veins through my mother, just as it flows in yours. I did not come here to claim your crown, Robb. I came to offer alliance." But Robb shakes his head, his young face resolute despite the magnitude of his decision. "The North declared me king because we sought independence from southern tyranny. But if a true king rises, if Aegon Targaryen lives and proves worthy of the Iron Throne, then the North will follow where honor leads." The great Jon's bellow echoes off the ancient stones. "The king in the North bends to no southern lord." "But he might bend to a Targaryen who carries Stark blood," Robb replies firmly, rising from his chair to face his assembled bannermen. "This is not submission. This is justice. This is the rightful king reclaiming his throne with northern steel to guard his back." One by one, the northern lords look from their young king to the dragon prince who stands before them. They see honor in Jon's bearing, truth in Arthur's eyes, and something deeper, the promise of an end to the wars that have bled the North white. When Robb draws his sword and offers the hilt to Jon, the symbolism rings clear as a bell tower's chime. I, Robb of House Stark, king in the north, do hereby bend the knee to Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, rightful king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. The hall explodes into motion as northern lords struggle with oaths and loyalties, but the great Jon's voice cuts through the chaos like a sword through silk. If the Starks say he's our king, then he's our king, the massive lord bellows. The north follows the wolves, and the wolves follow the dragon. Meanwhile, ravens bring news from the east that changes everything. On Dragonstone, the ancient seat of Targaryen power, ships have arrived bearing the three-headed dragon of old Valyria. But these ships carry not Stannis Baratheon's eagles, but a young woman with silver-gold hair who commands 3 living dragons and an army of Unsullied. Daenerys Targaryen has come home to Westeros at last. Arthur reads the report with growing concern, while Jon digests the implications. His aunt, for that is what she is, though only a year younger than himself, has crossed the narrow sea with power enough to challenge any claimant to the Iron Throne. Worse, she likely sees his claim as nothing more than the pretension of an upstart nephew. She calls herself the rightful queen, Arthur says quietly, as they study the intelligence reports in Riverrun's solar. 3 dragons, 8,000 Unsullied, and whatever sellsword companies she brought from Essos, the lords of the Crown Lands, are already flocking to her banner. Jon stares out the window at the assembled armies in Riverrun's fields, 20,000 northern spears joined now with 10,000 from Dorne, a formidable force, but one that has never faced dragonfire. What would you counsel? Jon asks his guardian. She is family, but she sees me as a usurper of her birthright. Arthur considers the question with the weight of years and experience. Your father believed in diplomacy before war, in words before swords. Perhaps Daenerys can be reasoned with. Perhaps she can be made to see that the realm is large enough for 2 dragons. And if she cannot, then you must be prepared to do what honor demands, even if it costs you everything. Arthur's voice carries the pain of hard-won wisdom. A true king puts the realm before himself, always. That is the burden Rhaegar carried, and the burden you must carry now. That night, Jon writes perhaps the most important letter of his life. By flickering candlelight, he crafts words meant to bridge the gap between competing claims and family blood. To Daenerys Targaryen, last daughter of the Mad King, he offers not submission, but partnership. 2 dragons to heal the realm's wounds, 2 Targaryens to restore the dynasty that Robert's rebellion shattered. But even as he writes, Jon knows the odds of peaceful resolution grow slimmer with each passing hour. Daenerys has conquered cities and burned enemies, has grown accustomed to absolute power and unquestioned authority. The idea of sharing rule with a nephew she has never met may prove as foreign to her as mercy to a lion. At dawn, the combined armies break camp and begin their march toward King's Landing. 30,000 men move south under banners both familiar and strange, the dire wolf of Stark beside the 3-headed dragon of Targaryen, northern independence transformed into royal restoration. Jon rides at their head with dawn bright at his side, while behind him march men who have chosen to follow a king they barely know toward a destiny none of them can predict. But as they cross the Trident where his father once died, Jon feels the weight of history pressing down like storm clouds. Somewhere ahead waits King's Landing and the Iron Throne he was born to claim. Somewhere behind waits Dragonstone and the aunt who may prove his greatest ally or his deadliest enemy. The realm holds its breath as 2 dragons prepare to meet, and only the gods know whether their encounter will bring salvation or destruction to the 7 kingdoms that have bled too long already. Arthur rides beside his king and sees the future hanging in the balance like a sword above the neck of all they hold dear. The boy he raised has become a man, the hidden prince has become a dragon king, and now the final test approaches with fire and blood trailing in its wake. The Game of Thrones nears its climax, and the realm will soon discover whether the blood of the dragon runs hot enough to forge a new golden age, or cold enough to bring about a final winter from which there may be no spring. The morning sun rises blood-red over King's Landing as 3 armies converge upon the ancient city like the closing fists of fate. From the north come 30,000 men bearing the banners of wolf and dragon, their steel bright with righteous purpose. From the east, across Blackwater Bay, the ships of Daenerys Targaryen darken the horizon like storm clouds, 8,000 unsullied, ready to die at their queen's command. And from within the Red Keep's crimson walls, the golden lions of Lannister prepare their final stand. Jon sits his destrier on the hills overlooking the capital, dawn singing softly in the morning wind as if the ancient blade can taste the bloodshed to come. Around him, the lords of North and Dawn make their final preparations, siege engines wheeled into position, scaling ladders readied for the assault, men checking armor and weapons with the grim efficiency of soldiers who know this day will decide everything. But it is the sight of dragons circling overhead that makes Jon's heart race with both wonder and dread. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion wheel through the sky like living nightmares, their shadows falling across the city like the promise of fire and death. Somewhere below, his aunt commands beasts that could reduce King's Landing to ash within the hour. Arthur rides up beside him, the former Kingsguard's face grave beneath his helm. "She's coming," he says simply, pointing to where a small party emerges from Daenerys' lines, riding under a banner of parley toward the hills where Jon's forces wait. The meeting takes place in the shadow of the city walls, where the very stones seem to hold their breath. Daenerys Targaryen dismounts from her silver mare with fluid grace, her violet eyes taking in Jon's face with a mixture of calculation and barely contained fury. She is beautiful, Jon realizes, but it is the terrible beauty of dragonfire, mesmerizing and deadly in equal measure. "So," she says, her voice carrying the accent of old Valyria and the authority of a queen who has never bent the knee, "you are the pretender who claims my birthright." "I am Aegon Targaryen," Jon replies steadily, matching her gaze without flinching. "Son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. I claim nothing that is not mine by right of birth." Daenerys laughs, but there is no humor in the sound. "Rights? You speak of rights while I have spent years conquering cities and freeing slaves? You were raised in comfort while I walked through fire to birth dragons from stone. What right do you have to anything?" "The right that comes from being born to the throne you seek," Jon answers, his voice carrying the steel that Arthur taught him. "I do not diminish your accomplishments, Aunt, but birthright is not earned through conquest. It simply is." The word aunt hits Daenerys like a physical blow. She sees the resemblance now, the Targaryen features that mark Jon as surely as they mark her. But rather than acceptance, it kindles rage in her violet eyes. "Then prove it," she hisses, stepping closer until they stand mere feet apart. "Take your birthright by force, as I have taken everything else. But know that my dragons will burn every man who follows you before I surrender a single stone of what is mine." Jon looks into those beautiful, terrible eyes and sees madness lurking there. Not the cackling insanity of the Mad King, but the cold fury of a woman who has never been denied anything she desired. In that moment, he knows there will be no alliance, no peaceful resolution. Only fire and blood, as the words of their house promise. So be it, Jon says quietly, backing toward his horse. But when the city burns, remember that I offered another way. The siege of King's Landing begins with the roar of dragons and the thunder of 10,000 feet charging toward ancient gates. Daenerys strikes first, her children breathing fire across the city's defenses as Unsullied pour from their ships like an iron tide. But Jon's forces are not idle. Northern heavy horse crash against the gold cloaks, while Dornish spears probe for weaknesses in walls that have stood for 3 centuries. From the Red Keep's highest tower, Queen Cersei watches the battle unfold with wine-bright eyes and a smile that speaks of madness and wildfire. Beside her stands Joffrey, barely 14, but already drunk on the power of life and death. They have prepared their own surprise for whoever claims victory below, caches of wildfire hidden throughout the city, ready to turn triumph into tragedy with a single word. But the battle belongs to younger dragons now. Jon leads his men through the city's twisting streets, dawn carving a path of light through the chaos of urban warfare. Behind him come the men who have followed him across half a continent, their voices raised in war cries that echo off ancient stones. It is in the throne room itself that the final confrontation comes, as Jon fights his way through the last of the Kingsguard to stand before the Iron Throne. Here waits Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer himself, his golden armor bright despite the smoke that pours through shattered windows. Another Targaryen come to claim the throne, Jaime says, raising his sword in salute. Tell me, boy, will you prove as mad as your grandfather when the crown sits heavy on your head? I am not my grandfather, Jon replies, drawing dawn with fluid grace. And you are not the young knight who saved a city from wildfire. Their duel unfolds with deadly beauty, 2 master swordsmen dancing the ancient dance of steel and death. Jaime fights with the skill of decades and the desperation of a man defending everything he loves. But Jon has youth and righteousness on his side, and dawn sings its song of justice as it cuts through the smoky air. It is Arthur who ends it, appearing from the shadows to intercept Jaime's killing stroke meant for Jon's back. The 2 former brothers of the Kingsguard meet in a clash that shakes the very throne room, their swords ringing like funeral bells as they fight with the fury of men who know their time has ended. You broke your vows, Arthur snarls as their blades lock near the hilts. As did you, Jaime replies through gritted teeth. At least I broke them to save lives, not hide princes. But age and injury have slowed the Kingslayer, while Arthur fights with the desperate strength of a man protecting his life's work. When Jaime's guard drops for an instant, Arthur's blade finds the gap between gorget and helm. Yet even as Jaime falls, his own sword bites deep into Arthur's side, finding the join between plate and mail. Arthur! Jon's cry echoes through the throne room as both knights collapse, their blood mingling on the stones where kings have ruled for 3 centuries. Jon drops Dawn and rushes to Arthur's side, cradling the man who raised him, as both father and teacher lay dying in his arms. Arthur's eyes flutter open one last time, focusing on Jon's face with an effort that costs him dearly. Be better than us, Arthur whispers, his voice barely audible above the sounds of battle beyond. Be the king Rhaegar dreamed of. And with those words, Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, breathes his last in the shadow of the Iron Throne he helped preserve for the rightful king. Jon rises slowly, grief and rage warring in his heart as he looks upon the twisted metal seat that has cost so much blood to claim. Around him, the sounds of battle fade as his forces secure the Red Keep. Somewhere in the city, Daenerys retreats toward her ships, her dragons screaming their fury as they withdraw to Dragonstone. But it is not the throne that captures Jon's attention as he stands in that smoky chamber. It is the sight of Tywin Lannister, proud and unyielding even in defeat, kneeling with his surviving grandchildren before the new king. "Your Grace," Tywin says, his voice carrying no trace of submission despite his position, "I surrender the city and place myself at your mercy." Jon looks down at the man who orchestrated so much suffering, who ordered the deaths of children and the sack of cities. Justice demands blood for blood, the old way that has ruled Westeros since the dawn of time. But Arthur's words echo in his mind, and Jon remembers the lessons learned in Dorne's halls about mercy being stronger than vengeance. "Rise, Lord Tywin," Jon says, his voice carrying across the throne room. "You and yours will face trial, but you will face it fairly. The realm has seen enough blood for one day." The words carry the weight of kingship, of a ruler who chooses justice over revenge, even when his heart cries out for blood. It is the moment that defines Aegon Targaryen's reign before it truly begins. Not conquest through fire and blood, but restoration through mercy and law. Outside the Red Keep's walls, King's Landing burns where dragonfire touched it, but the city lives. The people who cowered in cellars emerge to find not the pillaging and rape they expected, but foreign soldiers helping to fight the flames and tend the wounded. This is a different kind of conquest, one that seeks to heal rather than destroy. Arthur Dayne is dead, but his legacy lives in the king he shaped through love and sacrifice. The Iron Throne waits for its rightful heir, and the realm holds its breath to see what manner of ruler will sit upon it when the smoke finally clears. The Iron Throne has known many kings, but few ascend to its twisted seat with such purpose as Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, on the day of his coronation. The throne room of the Red Keep gleams with fresh scrubbed stones, the smoke and blood of battle washed away by servants who whisper of a new age dawning. Dawn rests across Jon's knees as he sits upon the ancient seat, its pale blade catching the light that streams through tall windows like captured starfire. Before him kneel the lords of 7 kingdoms, their banners a tapestry of old loyalties reforged in the crucible of war. Lord Robb Stark represents the North, his wolf banner proud beside the 3-headed dragon. Prince Doran Martell speaks for Dorne, his patient eyes bright with satisfaction at seeing a just king upon the throne. Even Lord Tyrion Lannister bends the knee, speaking for his defeated house with the wit and wisdom that kept him alive through the chaos. "Rise, all of you," Jon commands, his voice carrying the authority that Arthur taught him, but tempered with the mercy that is uniquely his own. We are not here to grovel or prostrate ourselves before power. We are here to forge a realm where justice serves all, not merely those born to privilege. The coronation ceremony unfolds with ancient ritual and new purpose. The High Septon places the crown of Aegon the Conqueror upon Jon's brow, but it is the words Jon speaks that mark this moment as different from all those that came before. "I swear before gods and men that I shall rule not for my own glory, but for the peace and prosperity of all who call this realm home. I shall be a king who listens as much as he commands, who shows mercy where mercy serves justice, who remembers that the throne exists to serve the people, not the reverse." But even as celebration fills the Red Keep's halls, Jon's thoughts turn to darker matters. From Dragonstone comes word that Daenerys Targaryen has not fled across the narrow sea as many expected. Instead, she gathers what remains of her forces and sends ravens bearing challenges and threats in equal measure. "She will not yield," Tyrion observes during a small council meeting, his mismatched eyes dark with concern. "My experience with queens suggests that Daenerys sees compromise as weakness and sharing power as theft." Jon looks out the window toward Blackwater Bay, where Dragonstone rises from the waters like a promise of future conflict. "Then I must go to her myself, face to face, one Targaryen to another. Perhaps reason can prevail where ravens have failed. The journey to Dragonstone unfolds with careful diplomacy rather than overwhelming force. Jon takes only a small retinue: Sir Edric Dayne, now grown tall and strong at 15, and a handful of guards bearing banners of parley. Across the narrow sea, they sail toward confrontation that could birth either peace or renewed war. The meeting takes place in Dragonstone's Great Hall, where dragon skulls stare down from ancient walls, and the smell of sulphur hangs heavy in the air. Daenerys receives him on the carved stone throne of her ancestors, her 3 dragons coiled around the chamber like living shadows. She is beautiful still, but there is something broken in her violet eyes, the look of a conqueror who discovered that victory tastes like ash. "You come to gloat?" she asks, her voice carrying none of the fire that once burned cities. "I come to offer what I offered before," Jon replies, moving to stand before her throne with Dawn at his side but undrawn. Partnership, alliance, a chance to heal the wounds that our family's civil wars have carved into this realm. Daenerys laughs, but the sound carries more pain than humor. "You would trust me after everything? After I tried to burn your kingdom?" "I would trust you to be better than our worst impulses," Jon answers. "You freed slaves across Slaver's Bay. You fought injustice wherever you found it. That woman still lives within you, Aunt. She is who the realm needs, not the conqueror who burns cities." For long moments, silence stretches between them, while dragons shift and rumble in the shadows. When Daenerys speaks again, her voice carries the weight of exhaustion and loss. "I am tired, nephew. Tired of war, tired of death, tired of seeing the cost of every choice written in blood and ash. Perhaps it is time for this dragon to rest." The treaty they forged that day reshapes the political landscape of Westeros. Daenerys retains Dragonstone as her seat, but swears fealty to King Aegon and agrees to use her dragons only in defense of the realm. In return, Jon grants her a place on his small council and authority over reforms to slavery and justice that echo her work in Essos. But it is the personal cost that weighs heaviest on Jon's heart. A moon's turn after his coronation, he makes a pilgrimage that has haunted his thoughts since the moment Arthur died in his arms. The journey to Starfall unfolds under autumn skies, the company small and solemn as they bear the bones of the sword of the morning home to rest. The sept at Starfall stands ancient and weathered, its stones worn smooth by centuries of wind and prayer. Here, in the shadow of the Palestone sword, where Ashara took her final leap, they lay Arthur Dayne to rest beside his sister in the family crypts. The ceremony is simple, as Arthur would have wanted. No grand speeches or elaborate rituals, just the quiet dignity of a knight who served faithfully until the end. Jon speaks the words himself, his voice steady despite the grief that threatens to choke him. Here lies Arthur Dayne, the sword of the morning, who kept faith with a dying promise and raised a prince with honor and love. He was a knight when knighthood meant something, a guardian when guardians were needed most, and a father to a boy who knew no blood tie but felt every bond of care. As earth covers the simple stone that marks Arthur's resting place, Jon feels a chapter of his life closing forever. The man who taught him swordplay and honor, who showed him mercy and justice, who died protecting his chance at kingship. Arthur's legacy lives not in stone monuments, but in the choices Jon makes each day as king. The years that follow mark the beginning of what chroniclers will call the Golden Restoration. Justice flows from King's Landing like water from a spring, reaching every corner of the realm with laws that protect the weak and restrain the powerful. The small council, meets not in shadows and whispers, but in open session, where even common folk can petition their king for redress. Roads grow safe for travellers, ports bustle with honest trade, and the long summer stretches on with prosperity that touches peasant and prince alike. Jon marries Lady Margaery Tyrell in a ceremony that joins the ancient blood of dragons to the fertile lands of the Reach. Their union brings not just political alliance, but genuine affection. And when their first son draws breath in the 3rd year of Jon's reign, the realm celebrates the birth of Prince Rhaegar, named for the father Jon never knew, but honoured still. 20 years pass like pages in a book, each marked by growth and peace that seems too good to last yet somehow endures. The boy king grows into a man whose wisdom matches his father's example, whose justice serves high and low alike, whose mercy transforms enemies into allies. When his hair begins to show the first threads of silver, and his face bears the lines that come from carrying a crown's weight, Jon still rises each dawn with dawn at his side and duty in his heart. It is in the practice yard of the Red Keep that our tale finds its end, where King Aegon teaches his son the lessons that Arthur once taught him. Prince Rhaegar, now 7 years old and eager for adventure, holds a wooden sword with the same grip that his grandfather might have used. His violet eyes shine with Targaryen fire, but his smile carries the warmth that speaks of a childhood filled with love rather than fear. "Remember," Jon says as they circle each other in the morning sun, dawn bright in his hand while the prince wields his practice blade, "the sword serves the man, not the reverse. A true knight fights not for glory or gold, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves." "Yes, Papa," Prince Rhaegar replies, his young voice serious with the weight of the lesson. "Like great Uncle Arthur did for you." Jon smiles, seeing in his son's face the future of their house and the realm they serve. "Exactly like Arthur did for me, and like I hope to do for you, until you are ready to carry Dawn yourself." The practice continues as the sun climbs higher, father teaching son the ancient dance of steel and honor that has protected the realm for generations. In the shadows of the yard, servants and courtiers watch with smiles, knowing they witness the continuation of a legacy built on love rather than fear, justice rather than conquest. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share,